A black millionaire returned from a 6-month deployment only to be paralyzed by the sight of his young niece, locked in a dark, barren room. The rest of the house was immaculate, a testament to the charming man his late sister's friend was now dating, a man who insisted the girl was just acting out for attention. Why was a child treated like a prisoner in her own home? And who was the real monster hiding in plain sight? Marcus Thorne felt the wrongness in the air before he even stepped out of his car. It was a familiar sensation, a cold prickle at the base of his neck, honed by years in places where smiles concealed threats and silence was a prelude to violence. He had spent the last decade building a global security empire on his ability to perceive these subtle dissonances. Now, standing on the curb, looking at his late sister's house, the feeling was suffocating. The lawn was a manicured green carpet, impossibly perfect. The hydrangeas flanking the porch were in a state of aggressive, vibrant bloom, their colors almost painfully bright against the pristine white siding. It was a house from a magazine, a caricature of suburban bliss that felt profoundly, fundamentally false. This wasn't Clara's home anymore. His sister had loved organized chaos. Her garden had been a riot of wildflowers, her porch usually cluttered with muddy boots and half-finished projects. This sterile perfection felt like an erasure. He walked up the stone path, his polished leather shoes making no sound. He had been in Dubai for 6 months, finalizing a deal that had cemented his company's legacy and his own formidable fortune. The entire time, a low-grade anxiety about his niece, Lily, had hummed beneath the surface. Clara had been gone for nearly a year, a sudden, brutal illness that had stolen her from them. Marcus, her only living relative, had become Lily's legal guardian. But the Dubai contract was unavoidable, a complex beast that required his personal touch. He'd left his 6-year-old niece in the care of Sarah, Clara's lifelong best friend, a woman he'd thought he could trust implicitly. A few months ago, Sarah had called, her voice fluttering with a nervous excitement, to announce she had met someone, a wonderful man named Richard Sterling. He was so good with Lily, she'd said, so supportive. Marcus had heard the slight hesitation in her voice but had dismissed it as the normal jitters of a new relationship. Now that memory felt like a shard of glass in his gut. He rang the bell, the cheerful melodic chime a jarring counterpoint to the dread coiling inside him. The door was opened by a man who radiated a practiced, effortless charm. Richard Sterling was handsome in a way that seemed assembled by a committee. Perfect teeth, a warm tan, hair artfully touched with gray at the temples. He wore a cashmere sweater and a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. Marcus, it's an honor to finally meet you. Sarah has told me so much, Richard said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, a display of confident control. Please come in. Sarah's just in the kitchen. Marcus stepped into the foyer, his gaze sweeping the interior. Like the outside, it was immaculate, cold. The warm, lived-in clutter of his sister's life had been replaced by minimalist furniture and generic art. There were no pictures of Clara, no sign of a child's presence, no stray toys, no colorful drawings taped to the refrigerator. Where is Lily? Marcus asked, his voice flat, cutting through Richard's pleasantries. Richard's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Ah, Lily. She's having a bit of quiet time. She's been a handful lately. The trauma, you know. We found a calm-down corner is best for her when she gets overwhelmed. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She looked pale, thinner than he remembered, and her smile was a fragile, brittle thing. Marcus, you're here. How was your flight? Where is she, Sarah? He repeated, his eyes holding hers, silently pleading for the truth. She flinched, her gaze darting towards Richard before skittering away. Richard's right. She just needs a little space. We can have some coffee? No, Marcus said. The word was quiet but carried the weight of an ultimatum. I'm going to see my niece. Now. He started moving through the house, his instincts guiding him. He checked the living room, the kitchen, the hallway leading to the bedrooms. It was all the same, sterile, empty, wrong. At the end of the hall was a narrow door he recognized as leading to the pantry under the stairs. It was closed. There was a new bolt on the outside, a heavy, industrial-looking slide lock that was grotesquely out of place. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. He stopped. His heart clenched. Something wasn't right. He slid the bolt. It was heavy, cold to the touch. He turned the knob and pulled the door open, revealing a pocket of absolute darkness. A faint, stale smell of unwashed linen and something else, fear, wafted out. He reached inside, fumbling along the wall until his fingers found a light switch. He flipped it. The sudden glare of a single, bare bulb illuminated a scene that would be burned into his memory for the rest of his life. The space was tiny, no bigger than a closet. Shelves ripped from the walls, leaving scarred plaster. On the floor was a thin, stained mattress. And on that mattress, curled into a tight ball, was Lily. She was wearing a faded t-shirt and leggings, both of which were too small for her. Her hair was matted, her face smudged with dirt. In her arms, she clutched a threadbare teddy bear, its button eyes staring into nothingness. She didn't look up when the light came on. She just flinched, her small body tensing as if bracing for a blow. He saw a faint, yellowing bruise on her cheekbone and dark circles under her eyes that made her look like a tiny, haunted old woman. The vibrant, laughing girl from his memories was gone, replaced by this silent, terrified ghost. The world narrowed to the sight of that small, broken child on a dirty mattress in a locked closet, and a cold, precise rage, unlike anything he had ever known, began to crystallize in Marcus's soul. A wave of nausea and fury washed over him, so potent it threatened to buckle his knees. For a moment, the sounds of the house, Richard's placating voice starting up behind him, Sarah's nervous shuffling, faded into a dull roar. All he could see was Lily, his sister's daughter, the last piece of Clara left on this earth, reduced to this. He took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing the white-hot rage down, packing it into a dense, cold core of purpose in his chest. Emotion was a liability. Action was required. He stepped into the cramped space, crouching down so he was on her level. The air was thick and close. "Lily?" he said, his voice softer than he thought possible. "It's Uncle Marcus. I'm here." She didn't respond, didn't uncurl. She just squeezed the teddy bear tighter, her knuckles white. He could see the fine tremor in her hands. He reached out slowly, his hand open, palm up, and gently touched her shoulder. She flinched violently, a small, choked gasp escaping her lips. It was a sound of pure, reflexive terror. He pulled his hand back as if burned. Behind him, Richard cleared his throat. "You see? She's highly sensitive, prone to these episodes. We're working with a therapist who suggested this method. A sensory deprivation space to de-escalate her tantrums." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it was almost believable. It was the kind of jargon-laced nonsense that intimidated people into nodding along. Marcus rose slowly, turning to face him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet intensity in his eyes was more menacing than any shout. "You put a bolt on the outside of a sensory deprivation space?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. Richard's mask of concern didn't slip. "For her safety. She sometimes tries to run out into the house and could hurt herself. It's for her own good, Marcus. We love this little girl." Love. The word was a profanity in this context. Marcus looked past him to Sarah, who was wringing her hands, her face a mask of guilt and fear. She wouldn't meet his eyes. That was all the confirmation he needed. She was trapped, a pawn in whatever sick game this man was playing. He turned back to the closet. "Lily," he said again, his voice firm but gentle. "We're leaving now." He didn't wait for her to move. He reached in, sliding one arm under her legs and the other behind her back, and lifted her into his arms. She was terrifyingly light, a bundle of sharp angles and fragile bones. She stiffened, a silent scream of panic running through her body, but she didn't fight him. She buried her face in his shoulder, hiding from the light, from the man in the hallway. As he held her, he felt a profound, unbreakable vow settle over him. "I failed you, Clara," he thought, a silent apology to his sister. I wasn't here, but I am here now, and I will burn his entire world to the ground for this. I swear it. He walked out of the hallway, carrying Lily as if she were made of spun glass. Richard stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Now hold on. I don't think it's wise to disrupt her routine like this. We are her legal caretakers for the moment. That moment is over, Marcus said, his voice like chips of ice. Get out of my way. There was a flicker of something ugly in Richard's eyes, a flash of the predator beneath the cashmere. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a look of wounded sincerity. I think you're overreacting. You're emotional, and that's understandable. But Sarah and I have only Lily's best interests at heart. I'm taking her to my car, Marcus stated, not as a request, but as a fact. I will get her things, and then I will be back for the rest of her belongings tomorrow. Do not try to stop me. He brushed past Richard, the man's polished charm sliding off him like water off steel. He could feel Sarah's desperate eyes on his back, but he didn't look at her. Not yet. His priority was the small, trembling child in his arms. He carried her out the front door, away from the pristine, hollow house and into the clean air, each step a silent declaration of war. Marcus drove to his penthouse, a vast, minimalist space of glass and steel overlooking the city. It had always been his fortress of solitude, a place of quiet order that soothed the chaos he'd witnessed in the world. Now it felt cold and inadequate, a terrible place for a wounded child. He carried a sleeping Lily inside, her small body finally having succumbed to exhaustion in the car. He laid her gently on the king-sized bed in the guest suite, the crisp white duvet engulfing her. She didn't stir, but her brow was furrowed in a troubled sleep, her small hand still clutching the worn teddy bear. He stood over her for a long moment, the protective rage simmering within him. He had to be smart. Richard was a manipulator, a man who had already constructed a plausible narrative. A direct, angry confrontation would only play into his hands, painting Marcus as the unstable, grieving relative. This required precision, a systematic dismantling. He left the bedroom door ajar and went to his office. The first call was to his head of security, a former Mossad agent named Kale. I have a situation. I need a full, deep background workup on a man named Richard Sterling. Financials, associates, history, everything. I want to know every skeleton in his closet, every dollar he's ever griffed. Discretion is absolute. Consider it done, Kale replied, no questions asked. Next, he began to create a safe space for Lily. He ordered groceries online, everything a 6-year-old might like. Chicken nuggets, macaroni and cheese, apple juice, ice cream. He ordered art supplies, soft blankets, and a mountain of brightly colored pillows. He worked with a silent, focused energy, transforming a corner of the sprawling living room into a cozy nest. When Lily finally woke hours later, she padded silently out of the bedroom, a small, lost figure in the cavernous apartment. She saw the nest of pillows and blankets and hesitated. Marcus was sitting on the far side of the room, pretending to read a book. He didn't look at her directly, not wanting to spook her. There's apple juice in the fridge if you're thirsty, he said quietly. And I think I saw some chocolate chip cookies in the pantry. She didn't move. Her eyes, wide and watchful, scanned every corner of the room. He watched her from his periphery. She was mapping the exits, assessing threats. It was the survival instinct of a creature who had known only captivity. After a long silence, she crept over to the art supplies he'd laid out on a low coffee table. She picked up a black crayon and a piece of paper and began to draw, her movements small and furtive. For the next 2 days, this was their rhythm. Marcus worked quietly while Lily existed in her own silent world. She ate little, refused to speak, and flinched whenever he moved too quickly. Her only communication was through her drawings. They were all the same. A tiny, stick-figure girl trapped inside a small, dark box. Outside the box stood a much larger figure, a man with a wide, angry slash for a mouth. It was a child's raw, unfiltered testimony. It was all the proof he needed, but it wasn't the kind he could use in court. On the third day, he decided to seek out the reluctant witness. He drove back to his sister's neighborhood, parking a block away and approaching the house next door on foot. An elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, was tending her rose bushes. He remembered her from Clara's funeral, a kind woman with worried eyes. "Mrs. Gable?" he began. "I'm Marcus Thorne, Clara's brother." Her face clouded with a mixture of pity and fear. "Oh yes, the poor dear. And that little girl?" She trailed off, glancing nervously at the house next door. "I'm worried about Lily," Marcus said, keeping his voice low and calm. "I was hoping you might tell me if you've noticed anything unusual since Mr. Sterling moved in." Mrs. Gable began nervously pruning a perfectly healthy rose. "He's a very important man, you know. He's on the board of the city charity fund. Everyone says what a wonderful thing he's doing for Sarah and the girl." "What do you say, Mrs. Gable?" Marcus pressed gently. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I hear things," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Shouting. Not from Sarah. From him. I hear the little one crying. Last winter, during that cold snap, I saw her outside in the yard. No coat. She was just standing by the fence, shivering, for over an hour. When I finally got the courage to go over, Mr. Sterling came out and smiled that big, fake smile of his and said she was being punished for telling a lie, her eyes filled with tears of shame. I should have called someone, but he's so charming, so powerful. I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, that he'd make trouble." "You're not afraid anymore," Marcus said. "It wasn't a question. You're going to help me." She looked at him, at the quiet, unshakable certainty in his face, and for the first time, a flicker of hope entered her eyes. She nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" Cale's report on Richard Sterling landed in Marcus's secure inbox that evening. It was worse than he'd imagined. Richard was a grifter of the highest order, a social parasite who attached himself to vulnerable, wealthy women. He had a string of them in his past, women who had mysteriously lost their fortunes before he moved on. His celebrated charity was a shell, a front for laundering money and building a public profile that made him seem untouchable. He was a predator hiding in the open, cloaked in philanthropy and good breeding. The report was damning, but it was all circumstantial, a pattern of behavior that a skilled lawyer could easily dismiss. Marcus needed something undeniable, something that showed not just the financial fraud but the cruelty. His mind kept returning to Lily's teddy bear. She never let it go. It was her only constant, her silent companion. He remembered Clara mentioning it on a call not long before she passed. "I got one of those nanny cams," she'd said, laughing. "The kind hidden in a teddy bear. I just want to make sure the babysitter isn't letting her watch too much TV." It was a passing comment, a mother's casual worry. But what if the camera was still there? What if Sarah and Richard never knew? The thought sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He waited until Lily was asleep that night. He crept into her room, his heart pounding. She was curled on her side, her breathing soft and even. The bear was tucked under her arm. With the delicate precision of a bomb disposal expert, he gently worked the bear free from her grasp. She stirred, murmuring in her sleep, and he froze, holding his breath until she settled again. He took the bear to his office and examined it. In the seam along its back, he felt a small, hard rectangle. His fingers, clumsy with anticipation, fumbled with the stitching until he could pull it open. Inside was a tiny compartment containing a micro-SD card. His hands were shaking as he inserted the card into a reader and plugged it into his computer. Dozens of video files appeared on the screen, organized by date. He clicked on the most recent one. The camera's perspective was low to the ground, jostled, the audio muffled by fabric. It was the view from Lily's arms. He saw the sterile living room, the pristine kitchen. Then he heard Richard's voice, stripped of its public warmth, dripping with a cold, irritated venom. "I told you to finish your dinner," Richard's voice snarled. The camera shook as Lily was presumably grabbed. "Are you deaf? Or just stupid?" "I'm not hungry," Lily's small voice whispered. "You will eat what you are given." You are an ungrateful little brat, and you will learn some respect. Marcus's blood ran cold. He clicked through more files. He saw it all. He saw Richard locking her in the pantry, her small hands beating against the door as she sobbed. He saw Sarah trying to intervene, her voice pleading. Richard, please don't. She's just a child. And then he heard Richard's reply, a low, menacing threat. You will do as I say, Sarah, or what happened to your investment portfolio will be the least of your worries. You and this child are entirely dependent on me. Do you understand? Sarah's whimpering confirmation was barely audible. It was the key. Sarah wasn't just complicit. She was a hostage, trapped by financial ruin and fear. The first twist of the knife in Richard's carefully constructed world. Then Marcus found the file that broke him. The camera was pointed at the floor, but the audio was crystal clear. He heard a sharp cry of pain from Lily, followed by Richard's angry hiss. Stop your crying. It was just a little squeeze. Then he heard Lily's voice, a heartbreaking, desperate wail that tore through him. Mommy, she sobbed. It hurts too much. I want my mommy. He watched footage of Sarah sneaking into the pantry later that night, the beam of a flashlight cutting through the darkness. It's okay, sweetie, she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. He didn't mean it. She tried to hug Lily, but Richard's shadow filled the doorway. Get away from her. You'll make her soft. Marcus slammed his laptop shut. A strangled cry of rage caught in his throat. He had him. He had the monster on tape. The sound of his niece crying for her dead mother was the weapon he would use to obliterate Richard Sterling from existence. He had his smoking gun. Now all he needed was to build the guillotine. The next morning, Marcus summoned his lawyer to the penthouse. Evelyn Reed was a formidable woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a mind to match. She had handled his corporate contracts for years, but she'd started her career as a prosecutor in the Special Victims Unit. She understood the nature of evil. Marcus didn't waste time with pleasantries. He played her the audio from the most damning clips. Evelyn sat perfectly still, her face impassive, but he saw the tightening of her jaw, the cold fire that ignited in her eyes. When the last clip of Lily crying for her mother ended, she was silent for a full minute. The man is a psychopath, she said finally, her voice devoid of emotion. And a fool. Leaving evidence like that. He didn't know it existed, Marcus explained. It was my sister's. He felt invincible in that house. Invincibility is a delusion that is easily cured, Evelyn stated. We have child endangerment, unlawful imprisonment, assault, and based on what you told me about his threats to Sarah, we have extortion and coercion. With Cale's financial report, we can build a RICO case that will put him away for decades. But a trial takes time. This man needs to be destroyed publicly. Swiftly. I agree, Marcus said. He's being honored at the Children's Foundation Gala in 2 days. He's the keynote speaker. A slow, cold smile spread across Evelyn's face. Oh, that's perfect. Theatricality and leverage. He's going to be accepting an award for his work with vulnerable children while we play a recording of him abusing one. The irony is delicious. She laid out the plan. Marcus would secure a sworn affidavit from Mrs. Gable. Evelyn would prepare an emergency custody order and coordinate with a trusted contact in the district attorney's office. The final piece was his old friend, Detective David Chun of the city's major crimes unit. Marcus met David at a quiet diner downtown. He'd served with David in the Rangers. They had forged a bond in dust and fire that transcended time and distance. He laid out the situation, pushing the SD card across the table. David listened, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. He took the card. I'll get a warrant to pull the originals from the house and get a forensics team to authenticate this copy. But Marcus, this is clean. It's more than enough. He looked at his friend, seeing the haunted look in his eyes. We're going to get him, Marcus. We'll be waiting for your signal at the gala. With his allies in place, Marcus felt a sliver of the immense pressure on his chest begin to ease. The trap was set, but as he drove home, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. A clipped, professional voice identified herself as a caseworker from Child Protective Services. "Mr. Thorne, we've received a report expressing serious concern for the welfare of your niece, Lily Thorne," the woman said. "The report alleges that you forcibly removed her from a stable home environment and that you may be emotionally unstable following your sister's death. We'll need to schedule an immediate home visit and interview." Marcus felt a chill snake down his spine. Richard, the bastard, was trying to get ahead of it. He was using the very system designed to protect children as a weapon, twisting it to paint Marcus as the villain. It was a brilliant, despicable move. He was trying to discredit his accuser before the accusation was even made. "I will cooperate fully," Marcus said, his voice a tight wire of control. "When would you like to come?" The game had just escalated. Richard wasn't just a monster. He was a cunning one. Marcus now had less than 48 hours to expose him before Richard's web of lies entangled them all. The countdown to the gala had begun. The night of the gala arrived heavy with anticipation. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was a sea of black ties and glittering gowns, a self-congratulatory spectacle of the city's wealthiest patrons. Marcus stood in the shadows at the back of the cavernous room, a ghost in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He watched as Richard Sterling took the stage to a round of thunderous applause. The man was a master performer, his face a mask of humble gratitude as he accepted the Foundation's Humanitarian of the Year award. "To protect a child," Richard began, his voice resonating with false sincerity through the state-of-the-art sound system, "is the noblest calling of all. Our society is judged by how we treat our most vulnerable. They are a sacred trust, a trust one am humbled to accept on behalf of all of you who work to keep that flame of hope alive." The hypocrisy was so profound it was nauseating. Marcus saw Sarah in the crowd at a front table, looking like a beautifully dressed hostage, her applause mechanical, her eyes vacant. He gave the signal. Detective Chun and two uniformed officers, who had been waiting in the lobby, slipped into the room, taking up positions near the main exit. Evelyn Reed stood beside Marcus, a file folder in her hand, her expression as grim and final as a hanging judge. As Richard basked in another wave of applause, Marcus began to walk forward. He moved with a quiet, deliberate purpose, parting the sea of guests who turned to stare at the interruption. He didn't run, he didn't shout. He simply walked toward the stage, his presence a cold front moving through the warm, oblivious room. Richard saw him, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine alarm crossed his face. He gestured to the hotel security. "Gentlemen, could you please escort this man out? He's a distraught family member. This is a private matter." "It stopped being a private matter when you put a bolt on a child's door, Richard," Marcus said, his voice calm as he reached the steps to the stage. He turned to the sound technician in the wings, holding up a small digital audio player. "I have a small addition to the evening's presentation." Before security could react, he plugged the device into the audio mixer. A moment of silence, then the sound of a little girl's terrified sobbing filled the grand ballroom. It was followed by the harsh, venomous sound of Richard's voice. "Are you deaf? Or just stupid?" A collective gasp went through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably, their wine glasses frozen halfway to their lips. Richard's face went white. "This is doctored. It's slander. This man is insane." But Marcus let the tape play. The audience heard it all. The threats, the fear in Sarah's voice, Richard's cold declaration of his power over her. And then came the final, soul-destroying sound. Lily's high, heartbreaking wail. "Mommy! It hurts too much. I want my mommy." The audio echoed in the now-silent ballroom. The effect was devastating. The polished veneer of the evening shattered, exposing the raw, ugly truth beneath. All eyes turned from Marcus to Richard, no longer seeing a humanitarian, but a monster. It was Sarah who delivered the final blow. The recording seemed to break the spell of fear that had held her captive. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly on the polished floor. Tears streamed down her face as she pointed a shaking finger at the stage. "It's true!" she screamed, her voice cracking with a year's worth of suppressed anguish. All of it. He did it. He threatened me. He hurt her. He told me no one would ever believe us. That was it. The public confession. The emotional seal on Richard's fate. His carefully constructed world collapsed in an instant. His face contorted, the charming mask melting away to reveal the snarling, pathetic creature beneath. "You stupid woman!" he shrieked at Sarah, his voice a venomous hiss. "I gave you everything." He lunged toward her, but he never made it. Detective Chun was suddenly there, blocking his path. "Richard Sterling," Chen's voice boomed with authority. "You're under arrest for child abuse, assault, and extortion." The uniformed officers moved in, cuffing Richard's hands behind his back, as he devolved into a stream of incoherent rage and pathetic denials. The flash of cameras from the press table began to pop, capturing the complete and utter ruin of the humanitarian of the year. Marcus stood on the stage, a silent, stoic sentinel, watching as justice, swift and terrible, was finally served. The downfall of Richard Sterling was as spectacular as it was absolute. The gala footage went viral, the audio of his abuse playing on every news channel. The story of the philanthropist who preyed on children became a national scandal. Cale's financial investigation, combined with Sarah's testimony, led to a slew of federal charges for fraud and money laundering. Faced with an ironclad case and a lifetime in prison, Richard pled guilty to everything. His public ruin was total, his name now synonymous with deceit and cruelty. Sarah, granted immunity for her full cooperation, entered intensive therapy to deal with the trauma of her abuse and complicity. She signed over all her remaining assets to a trust for Lily, a small act of penance for her silence. Marcus felt no triumph, only a quiet, grim satisfaction. Justice was not a celebration. It was a restoration of balance. He finalized the paperwork, and the court granted him permanent, sole custody of Lily without hesitation. The CPS case against him was dismissed with a profound apology. The first thing he did was sell the penthouse. Its cold glass walls held too many memories of Lily's silent fear. He sold his company for a staggering sum, keeping only a small consulting role. His life's mission had changed. He poured his resources and his time into his new purpose, healing his niece. He bought a house far from the city, a sprawling cedar and stone cottage nestled on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It had a wild, rambling garden that reminded him of Clara's, and the constant, rhythmic sound of the waves was a soothing balm. He filled the house not with expensive art, but with Lily's drawings, which slowly began to incorporate new colors. A tentative blue for the sky, a hopeful green for the grass. They spent their days walking on the beach, collecting shells and searching for sand crabs. He taught her how to skip stones on the water, and he read her stories every night before bed. He never pushed her to talk about what had happened. He simply created an environment of unwavering safety and unconditional love, letting her heal at her own pace. He hired the best child therapist in the state, a warm, gentle woman who worked with Lily twice a week. Slowly, painstakingly, the ghost of the girl in the closet began to fade, replaced by the vibrant child she was always meant to be. The transformation was not in a sudden breakthrough, but in 1,000 small moments. The first time she laughed out loud at one of his bad jokes, the first time she initiated a hug, the first time she fell asleep on the couch next to him without a nightmare. Months melted into a year. The seasons changed, and with them so did Lily. The haunted look in her eyes was replaced by a bright, curious sparkle. The silence that had once defined her was now filled with questions about the world, with stories about her day, with the happy, uncomplicated chatter of a child who knows she is safe. One bright, sunny afternoon, they were sitting on the porch, watching the waves crash against the shore. Lily had been drawing, completely absorbed in her work. She had a new box of crayons, 100 different shades, and she used them all with abandon. Marcus was watching her, a quiet feeling of contentment settling over him, a peace he hadn't known was possible. She finished her picture and held it up for him to see. It wasn't a drawing of a girl in a box. It was a picture of their house on the cliff. Two figures stood on the porch, one very large and one very small, holding hands. The sky above them was a brilliant blue, and a huge, smiling yellow sun dominated the page. "It's us," she said, her voice clear and proud. He felt a lump form in his throat. "It's beautiful lily pad." She leaned against him, resting her head on his arm. She was quiet for a moment, then she looked up at him, her eyes serious and full of a love that healed the last of his own old wounds. "I love you, Uncle Marcus," she said. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close, and looked out at the endless ocean. He had returned to find a nightmare, but in its ashes, he had found his reason for being. He had found his family. In the end, what is strength? Is it the power to build empires, to command respect, to move through the world untouched? Or is it found in the quiet resolve to protect the vulnerable, to listen to the voices that cannot speak for themselves, and to stand against the darkness, no matter the cost? Evil often wears a charming mask, hiding its cruelty behind a facade of respectability. It thrives in the silence of those too afraid to speak up, in the shadows where the innocent are left to fend for themselves. But a single voice, rooted in courage and love, can be enough to tear that mask away and expose the monster beneath. It reminds us that the most profound acts of heroism don't always happen on a battlefield, but in the quiet, unwavering defense of a single, precious life. Have you ever witnessed a moment where quiet courage made all the difference? Have you seen someone stand up for another when it was easier to look away? Please share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences give us all hope. Thank you for reading, and may you always have the strength to protect the light in your own lives.